Hey, what's going on, guys? Fizz here once again. So this is going to be the first video of my preliminary POBs for patch 3.20 with the new skill Frozen Legion. So this video, a lot of this was, I saw Jungrone's video and I wanted to make like an HCSSF version of what he was doing, because obviously what he was doing was very glass cannon, looked very like software trade-esque. But he had good ideas in that video. And he built it a lot of how I like on the reveal stream. When I saw the skill, I was like, you probably like, you're going to play that with Inquisitor or something, right? So he had a lot of the same ideas that I figured you would end up like scaling this skill with, simply due to like the weird, awkward part of it being a spell, but also an attack, but also being full convert. So it's elemental, and elemental attacks being pretty weak. So you're going to want a way to bypass resistances, which Inquisitor is great for. However, someone in my Discord, while I was theory crafting this, brought up adding Vaal Earthquake into the build to help supplement clear and stuff like that. And I thought that was a crazy good idea. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because I was like, wow, that's a really good idea. And then he said he saw it in a comment on one of Jungrone's video about this build. So whoever you are, random guy on Jungrone's video who commented this, if you were the original person who came up with this idea, props to you. It was a good idea. And that is working Vaal Earthquake into the Frozen Legion build. So I'll get into that later, but first we're going to go with, okay, so Frozen Legion. What is Frozen Legion? Frozen Legion is basically sweep, but it's sweep procced off of a spell, which uses your attack stats. Okay. So we can only assume we only have the level 1 gym, but the level 1 gym stats are identical to level 1 sweep stats. And it says in the actual gym info, the Frozen Legion statues you summon use Frozen Sweep. So the only difference between sweep that we can ascertain right now without seeing the level 20 gym, the only difference between sweep and Frozen Sweep is that Frozen Sweep has 100% cold conversion built in, 100% fizz to cold conversion built in. That's the only difference. So it's again straight from the same way that Jungrone did it. I have resistance because I actually put gear on my character. I have like resistances set to what they roughly will be, right? Like obviously capped Ellie res and around like 35 to 45% chaos res for, you know, hardcore, and then 100% of fizz converted to cold for emulating the skill, and then 500% more damage on our sweep. The only things I have checked here are power charges, endurance charges, focus, because we are using focus craft as you do. On consecrated ground, we have blocked recently, spoiler, and enemy is chilled. And melee distance to enemy is 1, but this does literally nothing. It's just, I have the habit of typing that in from using close combat support. So what is different with my build? So like I said, I wanted to make it hardcore viable, and I don't want to use a tier 0 unique for my weapon. So we're using staves, funnily enough. Why staves? So I sat down, and originally when I first saw this, it's like, well, obviously you're going to use axes. They have like the most damage out of anything, really. It's the best base type by far. However, we are playing an Inquisitor. Using a two-handed axe on Inquisitor leaves us a little bit naked in terms of defense, because what defense can we really scale? We have to be heavy on the left side of the tree because we need elemental stats, and we need life, and we need attack stats. And because all of those are on the left side of the tree, there's no way we can afford to path anywhere near the right side of the tree for spell suppression, which means there's no reality in which we can actually cap our spell suppression. So how do we solve that issue? Well, that's easy. We go staves and we go block. As you can see here, I have managed to hit 50-50 block and spell block, and I'll get into how and why later on. But that is the core crux of defense for the build, right? We have 50-50 block. We have, as you can see, a little bit over 6k life total when you include the 1k ES. And then we rely on Inquisitor life regen as well. And that's kind of where it comes from. So we don't have spell suppression. Instead, we have block. We pray it's enough. It's not as good as spell suppression, but hopefully it will, you know, mitigate enough damage that we don't die, right? That's the goal. So pathing through the elemental damage nodes as you do, through retribution, down through precision, scaling AoE. So this is something Jung in his video said, you know, he highly prioritizes AoE. So he inspired me to click this node here because it does actually give me +1 radius. Otherwise, if I didn't hit that breakpoint, I wouldn't have clicked it. So there's some interesting things that are going on here. So Jung Roan, if you haven't seen his video, he scaled maces because he was using Rohi Iqui or whatever that mace is called. It attacks very, very slow, but it does a ton of damage. And because he was using maces, basically he gets power charge generation for free. He gets a bunch of damage, and he gets to take Bone Breaker. You guys know, if you watch my previous build videos with melee builds, I love Bone Breaker and I love Mace Melee because you get so much AoE, right? So you get 28% AoE for these 3 passive nodes here, which is quite a lot of AoE. However, with Staves, we obviously can't take those nodes, so I actually pathed towards Enigmatic Reach instead, a node you've probably never seen anybody click in their entire life. So what does it do? Well, the first 2 nodes leading up to it are quite good. They give 12% AoE per, so we have 24% AoE for 2 passive nodes right here. And then the last one is 10% attack speed with Staves, 10% cast speed while wielding a staff, which is really weird wording because these are the same thing. Attack speed with Staves is a plural form of staff, so both of these are the same thing. They just have different wording, which is very odd. Anyway, 10% increase attack speed with Staves, 10% increase cast speed with Staves, which is very good for us because our main skill is both a spell and it scales off our attack speed. And 3% increase AoE per power charge. Now we only have 3 power charges, right? However, assuming you don't click this, I did have this clicked at one point. I may change this if I need this duration node or not. This will have to be something that I change the day of actually playing this build and determining if I can sustain them or not. And I'll get into that later. 3% increase. So this is anywhere from 9 to 12% increase AoE on top of that. So, you know, 24%. So this is 33 to 36% increase AoE. You know, depending on if you grab this extra power charge or not, which is a ton of extra AoE. That is a ton of extra AoE. In addition to AoE here, so you get 20% AoE from these 2 nodes, and then another 10% there. It's 30% AoE there. So it's over 60% increase AoE on the tree, which funnily enough, ends up putting us at 39 radius on our tree here. Making sure all my links are correct. Okay. Yeah, so 39 radius on that. And then I believe if you click this, you do gain radius, or I could be wrong. I don't remember. At some point during this, I had like 41 or 42 radius, but I don't really remember what I clicked and what I changed to make that different. But I'm not going to worry about it right now. Anyway, so yeah, radius is pretty big. 39 radius, as you can see, is very big. Very big for the sweep. So clearing should be no issue, but it actually goes a little bit further. So I'm going to continue going about the passive points, and then I'll get into why that's a big deal. Yeah, down through discipline and training, Sanctity is a really good node. It gives you ES, it gives you a bunch of armor, gives you regen, and some strength and int. Holy Dominion, obviously, is resistances and damage. Divine Fervor is melee crit, because we are going crit from Inquisitor, and attack damage. I path down through here for Steelwood Stance. This is a staff node. The damage is kind of whatever. It's generic damage. It's 30% increased here, 12 and 10% respectively for the small nodes. But it gives us block, and that's what we're here for. So we get 800 plus 800 flat armor if we blocked recently, which is actually pretty good. 8% block chance here, 3% and 2%. The travel node on this side is actually quite good as well. It's 15% increased armor, which, as you can see, gives us a little bit shy of 2k armor, 5% increase for one passive node, which is not bad at all. So maybe you pick that up if you feel like it. Through there, we path through Devotion. Obviously, the life masteries that you would take on any build ever, which is plus 50 flat life. Up here is 10% increased max life. And then pathing over here, we grab Divine Shield. Obviously, we're gonna have, 35k armor. So it's just extra ES regen. Divine Shield's a really good 1-point node. So pathing through here, we have Whirling Barrier, which is a bunch of block, spell block, and attack block. The minor travel nodes here also give 3% of each, which is really good. The other side is just 15% generic increased damage, which is whatever. So this is definitely the side you want to path through. And then 20% chance to gain a power charge when you block. So here's the stipulation. I hope I can sustain this. We have 50-50 block while running through a map. So I should be blocking stuff all the time, right? So hopefully we can upkeep this. If I need to, I can grab this 20% increased duration node here, which will make our power charges last 12 seconds instead of 10, which could give extra buffer if I need to. And we're using Assassin's Mark. With quality, Assassin's Mark gives 5% chance on hit to generate a power charge. So hopefully between this block and Assassin's Mark, I can sustain power charges while bossing. If not, I will have to find another way to get them. Overall though, my crit chance without power charges is almost capped anyway. I'm at 92% without them. The biggest reason we want power charges while clearing is so we get that extra juicy 9 to 12% AoE from Enigmatic Reach. Because while mapping, it doesn't matter at all. You're going to deal so much damage that you're going to be killing everything in one hit anyway, especially with this whole build where the whole idea is like big hits, slow big hits. You're going to be killing everything anyway. So it doesn't matter if like you sometimes don't crit. 92% is quite high. And you're gonna, it's not like you have none or all of them. If you're not sustaining them, what I mean is you're not sustaining 3 all the time. You're pretty much always gonna have at least 1 or 2, especially like while mapping and stuff. So it's not a huge deal. But if this ends up not working, I will probably end up rerouting the tree a little bit, and probably I'll lean a little bit more into power charges and less into generic damage nodes or something. I'm thinking I grab overcharge, which gives me some duration and +1 to max, and then pathing over for Disciple of the Forbidden and taking the mastery for 100% increased charge duration, which would give us like 22 second long charges for power charges, which means they'll last infinitely, so we don't have to worry about it. That would also allow me to take the frenzy charge gain every X seconds on the chest piece to gain a bunch of generic 12% damage multi for free. I'm not sure if that's better than the current implicits I have with the Searing Exarch mods. I'll have to check that, but just other stuff that I've thought about that I could do depending on if this sustains in gameplay or not. Anyway, moving on from there, counterweight, really good node, 60% increased global crit strike chance and 30% global crit strike multi. And then smashing strikes, 30% increased damage with hits and ailments, 30% increased crit strike chance with staves, 10% chance to gain a strike, a endurance charge on melee crit strikes. So one, I don't really know if this will work because I don't know if this is like, this is another weird thing. We're summoning something that hits using our stats, but it is not us. So they will be critting, but I don't know if this will count. Like, this doesn't say on your critical strikes, but it says on melee critical strikes. So if this gives me endurance charges, then that's really cool. That means I technically don't need to use Enduring Cry in the build, which I am. It means I can use a different cry for more damage, which it would have to be Intimidating Cry. Because yeah, like you can't exert, so it would have to be like Intimidating Cry or something else, or you could just not take Call to Arms. But yeah, if again, a lot of unknowns because we don't know how it works, but depending on how this interacts with the skill, this will change what cry I end up using. So something really, really cool here is the Staff Mastery, plus 60% to crit strike multi if you haven't dealt a crit strike recently. So this one specifically says you. The minions that we summon, they're not actually minions. GGG has clarified this, by the way. They're not you. So we get 60% crit multi all the time for free, which is a lot of damage for one node. As you can see, it's about a 10% damage increase that we just get all the time for free because we're not critting, with the caveat that I'll get into later. And then pathing up here, since we're using Enduring Cry and or if we can sustain endurance charges from smashing strikes, we grab this node here because it's a 2-pointer for a jewel socket, which I want anyway. It's 1 more passive point to get another endurance charge, so why would you not? You get 4 endurance charges. It helps with survivability. Moving on from there, we take LE damage nodes, pathing up through the top for increased effect of non-damaging ailments, increased elemental damage, generic damage, and then elemental mastery for increased effect of non-damaging ailments. So just like Jung goes over in his video, there's nothing new here. This is to scale your ailment. So like while mapping, you're going to be like chilling and freezing everything, no problem with max. But this is more for bosses. I don't know if the hit's going to be high enough for normal pinnacle bosses, but this also scales, just like Jung said in his video, this scales the effectiveness of the focus craft on shock, which you want to be using like any build ever. Realistically, there's a lot of builds that people just could use this craft on, but they don't. The bench craft for shock enemies on focus is really, really strong, but it is very strong for this build because you'll like while bossing, you're basically gonna just wait for your Frozen Legion to hit max stacks and then pop the focus. So it'll be up for like, I think every other one of these, which is huge. Very, very big damage wise. Moving on from there, sovereignty, mana reservation node as you do, life from purity of flesh, and then we're pathing up towards another stave node here. One with the river, which is 30% increased elemental damage with staves, and then damage with weapons penetrates 5% elemental resistances. So this only matters if we don't crit, which again, while mapping, assuming you don't have Assassin's Mark and stuff like that up, I think my crit chance is like around like 90% or whatever, which, so it doesn't really matter, but if I don't, it'll help on like, if I don't crit on a rare or something like that. The nodes leading up to it also give an additional 4% pen, so this is 9% pen total with 20% generic damage. On the right side here, we have 40% crit strike chance and 20% crit strike multi, and 12 and 20 respectively on the travel nodes. So the right side is very strong. I think ultimately this is 50% for 3 passive points. If I do end up having to path for Disciple of the Forbidden, these are 3 passive points that I will probably unspecking because they are pretty good, but I think they're the weakest case out of most things on the tree. So the mastery we're taking here is 30% increased defenses while wielding staff. So we just get 30% increased defensive for 1 passive point. For 1 passive point, excuse me. It's quite late. As you can see, it's 2 a.m. This is just a really strong 1-pointer. Again, the staff masteries are actually really good. The downside is that they're attached to staves. So we already went over Enigmatic Reach. We path down over here. What's good over here? Well, another crit node. Serpent Stance, 40% increased global strike crit chance, 30 crit multi, 5% chance to block attack damage. If you've dealt a crit strike recently, which we just went over on this node over here, we are not dealing crit strikes, so we won't have that 5% block most of the time, except in some cases, which I'll go over in a minute. So the nodes leading up to it are also very good. All 3 of these give 20 crit strike chance, and the 2 in the middle give 10 crit multi. As you can see, we have tons of crit multi here. We are nearing 700%. And that's with only 1 gem, I'll add. And with Disciple of the Forbidden, you actually get a ton more. Yeah, it's 680, and then if you take Overcharge, it's 685. Again, with 1 jewel socket. So you can get a ton of crit multi. Other than that, it's just pathing down left side of the tree here. You grab the melee crit node here, Disemboweling. I took the crit mastery for 25% increased crit multi against unique enemies. It's a pretty decent 1-pointer. Again, if I have to path over to Disciple of the Forbidden, this passive is probably going. Pathing down through Barbarism is just life and max fire res. Down through Juggernaut, grabbing the small node here with an extra point for the extra armor. After that, through Call to Arms to use Enduring Cry on left click, using Bloodless, just life. Through Soul of Steel for that juicy armor and max res, feels really good anytime a build can path through here. And then Determination, Mana Reservation Efficiency for the Mastery. I pathed through Champion of the Cause with the small passive here for the Mana Reservation Efficiency. And then also have pathed through Eagle Eye to help with accuracy issues. And more importantly, Precision Mana Reservation Efficiency, because I am using a level 20 Precision. That's one of the reasons the dex requirement is quite high. So one of the biggest changes you could do to the build, realistically, if you don't path towards Disciple of the Forbidden and you kind of feel like Enigmatic Reach is overkill and you end up not needing it, is you can take the 4 points out of here, take 1 point out of the crit mastery, and you can path Prismatic Skin instead, which is a bunch of resist, right? So it's 2% to all max res and then 1% extra of the resistance of your choice. So it's very, very helpful in the defenses. If you click it, you can see what goes to there. So that's something you can do if the AoE feels like overkill. Also, for Glorious Vanity, fitting Glorious Vanity in this build, it's a little bit awkward, but you have to path down here instead to take Corrupted Soul, because if you put it anywhere else, it bricks stuff. If you put it here, it bricks your Serpent Stance and Enigmatic. If you put it here, it bricks your Stave nodes here. If you put it here, it bricks your Precision nodes. So you have to path down by Mind Over Matter for Corrupted Soul. So this is what it would look like if you do that. So again, what you would path out of to make this work, because it's 3 passive points to get down here, 1 passive point for the Jewel Socket, and then 1 passive point for Corrupted Soul itself, which means you need 5 passive points to make this work. I would probably take the 3 points out of here, the 1 point out of the crit mastery, and then sacrifice this 1 life node to make this work. So yeah, that's the different variations of the tree. Now, the Inquisitor Ascendancy, like, why would you take this? It's basically because of Inevitable Judgment, but Righteous Providence will give you a bunch of crit based on your int and strength. And Inevitable Judgment is why this works. Crit strikes ignore enemy. Ellie res means we don't have to really care about getting pen or any of the typical mumbo jumbo that comes with playing an elemental based skill. Very, very strong. And if you don't crit, it will penetrate 10% of the resists. And then in addition to that, we get 9% here. So almost 20% pen for free if we're not critting. That's something that'll feel good while leveling and stuff. These nodes mixed with that Ascendancy. This will feel really good while like leveling before you really get your character kitted out, before you get higher crit values. Anyway, and then the other side of this is just Pious Path. Basically, you get Consecrated Ground. Enemies on your Consecrated Ground take increased damage, and it gives you a ton of regen, which is the main defensive layer of the Ascendancy. So that's everything here dealing with the tree and the Ascendancy. If you guys have questions, let me know. Again, this is preliminary, and I just threw this together in like the last hour, and I just wanted to share this for anybody who is thinking about League starting the skill. So what am I using here? I'm using Sweep, increased crit damage, Inspiration, melee fizz damage, Pulverize, and elemental damage with attack. So the really cool thing with this skill is you can kind of just go hard and not care about attack speed, because getting attack speed has very minor advantages for this skill, because all it affects is the statue's swing timer, but you're only making them swing every once in a while, and it doesn't look like it would be super clunky one way or the other. Now, the difference between Jungron's POB and mine is that I have like basically double his attack rate, over double actually, because he's using that super slow unique. So I feel like you don't really need to scale attack speed at all or really care about it. So we get to use things like melee fizz and especially Pulverize and not really care. Whereas in a normal attack build, using melee fizz and Pulverize feels terrible because it's a minus 25% less multi on your attack speed, which just bricks you. Especially when you don't have Blood Rage or Frenzy charges up or stuff like that. Anyway, Inspiration for additional crit, but also to help with mana costs. Increased crit damage is obvious. It gives us a bunch of crit multi. Melee fizz damage because it's a bunch of extra melee fizz damage, and Ewa because Ewa, right? So the links are actually very straightforward. They make a bunch of sense. Pulverize is because it gives us a bunch of extra AoE as well as a lot of damage. So the curse, obviously Assassin's Mark, qualityed, 5% chance to gain power charge when hit. We're using Ancestral Warchief. I'm not using Vaal Ancestral Warchief, and basically it doesn't matter if this dies or not, because you can effectively, while bossing, you'll put this down, you'll cast the spell once, they'll all go off, and then you don't care anymore. Because you're waiting, like 4 seconds or whatever to be able to use the skill again. So this doesn't have that like melee issue of like needing to baby the totem and worry about uptime. You don't really need uptime for this. You'll throw it down, you'll pop the skill, it'll use the thing, and then you're done. So that's pretty nice. And then same thing here, Vortex with Bone Chill. This will just give you a very large DPS increase, honestly, for single target. And I will be manually casting this, so if you don't want to manually cast this, and if you're playing in like trade or softcore, you can just drop this and get damage somewhere else if you decide to use this version of the build. Because I'm left clicking Enduring Cry, which means that I will be self-casting Vortex. Which, what that effectively means is I'm only going to use it like on map bosses and actual bossing. I'll just pop Vortex down every once in a while. Probably put it on my spacebar or something. Next up, we have the auras, which I'm going to put it in the gloves for the +1 2-socketed AoE skills. So this is where I diverge a lot. I'm using Determination and Hatred because they're so obvious. Determination is staple on everything. Hatred because it's Fizz to cold conversion for free, so why would you not use this? It's an insane damage increase. Precision because we need accuracy and it also gives us crit strike chance. Very good. I'm using a level 15. You could probably use a higher level one. The level that I end up using is variable. And then I'm using Herald of Ice. So here's the interesting thing. Herald of Ice is actually not a huge damage increase, but I want to supplement my clear and make it feel better. If you don't care about that, you can actually, and if you wanted to, you could just get like a white socket, and then anytime you go for like actual bossing, you could just use Blood and Sand instead, and it's a lot more damage than just using Herald of Ice. But for general mapping, I want to use Herald of Ice, simply because of the other tech coming later, thanks to the random YouTube comment. And listen, I'm not saying I never would have reached this conclusion on my own, but I didn't even have to think because someone in my Discord said it as soon as I started pubing this. Anyway, Cast of Damage Shaken setup with Vaal Molten Shell, as you do. Flame Dash and Enduring Cry. Enduring Cry is going to be on our left click and it will be insta-cast due to Call to Arms. And finally, the crux of the build, Vaal Earthquake. Okay, we are not using Earthquake ever at all. We don't care about Earthquake. Fuck Earthquake. Okay, it's Vaal Earthquake. So we're using Vaal Earthquake with Pulverize, Melee Fizz, Fizz to Lightning, Hypothermia, and increased crit damage. Why? Okay, so here's the really awkward thing about doing this. We don't care about elemental conversion at all because Frozen Legion gets 100% conversion for free. Now, to get conversion on the tree, you would have to go super far out of your way. Now, funnily enough, on your gloves, you can actually grab the implicit, which I haven't done yet. So the numbers on this are actually going to be higher than what you're seeing here by a pretty decent margin, actually, significantly higher, to be clear. But what you can do is you can grab Fizz converted to cold on your glove implicit, and then use Fizz to lightning. And the large majority, like 90% of your EQ is now being converted to elemental. And we don't really care about Fizz to lightning specifically, because Hatred is giving us just extra Fizz is cold. And Fizz to lightning, normally you're thinking like 2 elements, but it's like, yeah, it doesn't matter because we just don't care about elemental resistances. So we can take that extra 50% Fizz converted to lightning, and it's just a net damage gain for us. And then we're gonna get 40%, which isn't in this POB right now, so excuse me. The number for the damage will actually be higher with that. And when calculating this, you need to take this out. Actually, you could just do this for the actual number. So yeah, without the glove implicit, it would be this. With the glove implicit, it would be this. So this is with the Eldritch Glove implicit, which will give you 40% cold converted to physical, or Fizz converted to cold rather, and using Fizz to lightning support on a 6 link. So even if you, obviously this means you need 2 6 links, but even if you don't have 2 6 links and you're using a 6 link and a 5 link, this is still 4.5 mil average damage on your aftershocks. Now, how does Vaal Earthquake work? Basically, you walk around and it will proc aftershocks. And you get 9 charges of this. So every time you use Vaal EQ, you get 9 of these procs that proc basically once per second. That's a lot of extra damage. Now, here's the crux of what I said earlier. Staff Mastery of getting free crit multi, this goes away when you use Vaal EQ. Now, obviously, being able to hit for this much damage 9 times vastly outweighs getting a little bit more crit multi on our statues. So the way this works for single target is anytime you're just using the statues while fighting the boss, you do get this 60 crit multi for free. Whenever you get your Vaal EQ, that'll go away for the duration of the Vaal EQ, and once Vaal EQ is done proccing on the boss, you go back to just using your statues, you get the crit multi back, right? So basically you won't have this crit multi for the first statue, the first Frozen Legion you cast after using Vaal Earthquake and Vaal Earthquake itself. aside from that, you'll have 100% uptime on this. And the funny part is though, once you use Vaal Earthquake, Serpent Stance will proc and you get 55 block chance instead of 50. So hey, that's pretty cool. It's an interesting interaction there. So the way this will work for like bossing and stuff is you'll throw down your War Chief, you'll throw down your Vortex, you'll make sure you have your Assassins mark up, and then you'll use Frozen Legion like once like every 4 seconds whenever it's at full stacks. Then when your souls charge up, you'll use Vaal EQ and get a huge damage burst, and then just use Frozen Legion again. And then this also fixes the map clear issue. So Vaal Earthquake with Herald of Ice should just make, and with the AoE scaling, should make map clearing an absolute breeze, okay? Now, even with all this, the boss damage might still be a little bit on the low side. You can actually use Heat Shiver if you want to. It is roughly like a 25% damage increase with the chill you'll have. Now, if you're freezing monsters, it literally doubles. It literally doubles the damage of the build. So if we go back into the config and we change this to 100% for sweep, and we go into sweep and turn off crit recently, you'll see that if we hover over Heat Shiver here, it is an 87% damage increase for DPS. If you go to the average hit, it's like 70% or whatever. So it's damn near doubling the damage of the build. So since this is one of the awesome things, you don't care about spell suppression on this build. So technically, even in hardcore, you could potentially fit in a Heat Shiver. The obvious downside here is that you don't have any life on this. You don't have any accuracy, so it will make hitting accuracy cap, you know, like hit cap, a little bit harder. But just the big thing is like survivability, and you lose out on the Eldritch. You lose out on the Eldritch implicits, which is definitely a sizable downside. However, with the changes to the Eldritch implicits, oh my god, I'm stumbling over my words so much. They're not as important on the helmet as they used to be. So helmet was always the most like iffy slot when it came to the implicits. It had for a lot of builds the worst implicits in some ways. And that's even more so true next patch because they're taking away curse effect off the helmet slots, which we couldn't get Assassin's Mark effect anyway on our helmet slot. So you could potentially do this. If I feel tanky enough, especially with the Glorious Vanity, I might slot in a Heat Shiver and just see, you know, how it feels. But yeah, I made the base POB without it. The only jewel I have in the build right now is a very, very modest 7 life and 12 crit multi. And I went for a generic crit multi because we care about, you can get like, I think 15% cold crit multi. But since we're using Vaal EQ, I want generic crit multi. So that's the really cool part of the build is Vaal EQ. While mapping, basically, anytime you encounter a rare or something, you can basically use your statues and instantly kill them. And then the rest of the time, those of you who don't know, Vaal EQ is like up all the time. If you've never played like a EQ bleed build or something, you only need 30 souls to use it. And it has a pretty short soul gain prevention time. So it just feels like it's up all the time. Because I'm pretty sure that when you use Vaal EQ, it doesn't work like a lot of other skills. As soon as you use Vaal EQ, it automatically goes on cooldown. It's not like you just gain the aftershocks. It's not like, I'm trying to think of something that this would apply to. It's not like other Vaal skills where the cooldown doesn't start until it's finished. I think it goes on cooldown immediately. I could be wrong, but based off, I've even played Bleed EQ relatively recently, a few leagues ago. It felt like it was just up all the time. Like as soon as my Vaal EQ ended, it was automatically up again. So I'm pretty sure the soul gain prevention doesn't, it just starts immediately. It doesn't start after you've used Vaal EQ to its entirety. So that'll just like take care of all your mapping needs, no problem. And like I said, probably a gym swap. Likely it would be optimal to do this for bossing. You could also, if Herald of Ice feels like overkill and you don't need it, and you don't feel like you want the damage of Blood and Sand, you can also use Defiance Banner instead as a defensive option, because it is a pretty good gain with survivability. All this will really depend. likely what I'll end up doing is getting like a 1 white socket on my gloves or whatever, and I'll swap out the damage aura depending, you know, because like it takes 2 seconds to just throw in blood and sand instead of Herald of Ice if I'm doing Maven or something. You know, it takes 2 seconds to gain basically 10% more damage for the build. But yeah, that's everything. Defensive layers is 4 endurance charges, 50-50 block and spell block, and obviously crazy regen from Inquisitor. And like I said, I haven't really put a lot of implicits on the build yet. It's not super decked out with anything really crazy. The weapon here, I have, I just threw on some random stats because you can kind of go ham with the weapon. You don't care about like attack speed and stuff like that. So it should be relatively easy to get any type of staff that has like really good stats. You can focus really hard on the fizz damage, or you could go really hard on getting a staff that has just okay fizz rolls and a ton of, you know, cold damage, crit multi, crit chance. Like there's so many beneficial stats that you can just kind of throw whatever you want as long as the weapon has decent fizz damage. I just made this like a generic. I want, so basically like when you're crafting a fizz weapon, you want to aim for like 3 good stats. So I just did the same thing. I got T2 flat fizz, T2% fizz, and T2 middle of the pack global crit multi, which T2% fizz is really easy to do if you also get the hybrid fizz here. So it's not like you need to hit T2 fizz. You can hit the hybrid roll and then a like T4 like natural roll or pure roll on the percent fizz, and you'd have the same amount of percent fizz. So this item isn't anything crazy or anything like that. It's super whatever. And there's a million stats that you can actually get on your weapon to scale the damage. So there's a lot of leeway there. And I chose Maelstrom Staff as the base simply because it had the, like, in my opinion, the best spread of damage while also having the highest amount of block, because we don't have spell suppression. I'm playing hardcore. I need defensive layers. So that was the most important thing to me. So that's why we're using a Maelstrom Staff. And then I just use generic armor ES spaces. Since there's no Gravicius craft anymore, and I'm not completely certain yet on whether or not I'm actually going to end up using a Glorious Vanity, I actually wanted to get as much raw ES as I could, because there's not any real life as ES that I can get on the build without using Glorious Vanity. So I chose a lot of things that have very high base rolls of both armor and flat ES. And then on most of these, it's just life. On the helmet, I have accuracy. And then where I could, I put armor, increased armor and ES rolls. But a lot of this is just whatever, right? Like this chest piece is not like on an end game build. By the time you're on a level 97 character, you better have something better than this, man. So a lot of these are pretty modest for the most part. On the boots, I just put the reduced chill and shock craft. And again, I don't have Eldritch implicits on the gloves or boots yet. Like I said, the POB is not finished or anything. For amulet, so this is really cool. Amulet, I just have life, increased max ES with bench crafted on reduced mana cost, and spell block, which I'm going to be utilizing the essence they're changing in 3.20, which can give spell block to amulets. So I'm going to use that new essence with my amulet to get additional spell block. So I'm getting spell block here, and also the Anoint, which is Mystic Bulwark. So Mystic Bulwark is the Annoyant, and it's 6% additional spell block and 1% increased mana regen per spell block, right? So if I end up not having mana issues and I don't need this mana regen, then I'm going to anoint Enigmatic Defense instead, which is basically just 6% additional attack block, which is, that puts us at 56% attack block. And then anytime we use Vaal EQ and we proc Serpent Stance, that'll put us at 61% attack block, which is really, really good. So yeah, that's pretty much everything with the items. Moving on to the rings. The rings, I just put life and accuracy because this is where I plan to get most of my accuracy. This is where I got most of my accuracy on my precise technique builds. So it stands to reason that it'll be the same here. It's 2 vermilion rings running literally just life and T2 accuracy rolls. And then on one, I have shock focus bench craft that I talked about earlier. On the other, I have another Elrion craft. On the belt, so this is the interesting part of the build. Dexterity is really hard to get. So I have an essence crafted Stygian Vise for dexterity, which are sorrow essences, I believe. And this is important. So you're going to have to craft your belt with sorrow essences because dexterity does not roll naturally on Stygian Vises, or maybe it's all belts. I don't remember, but it doesn't roll naturally on Stygian Vises for sure. So you're going to need to craft these with sorrow essences. So make sure you're farming your sorrow essences up to do your belt craft. Aside from that, I have whatever rolls on here. It's like T2 life and T2 or T3 flat ES, and then I bench crafted on 12% cooldown recovery. This is the only form of cooldown recovery that you can get in the game. I think off the top of my head, aside from Shaper Boots, it's the only cooldown recovery that I bothered to get, again, within reason. There may be other forms of cooldown recovery, but they're not realistic to fit into the build. There is, this is just bench crafted cooldown recovery. You can get, I think, 15 or 16% with the actual unveil, but since I'm using essence crafting, I'm not counting for unveils. And then there are Shaper Boots, but I did not account for those in the build either. Shaper Boots can roll between 10 and 15% additional cooldown recovery, but I feel like it's not really going to reduce the cooldown that much, but it's something I may end up doing. I am unsure as of right now if it's worth dropping Eldritch Implicits for the Shaper Boots, but I may. It's something I'll have to play around with and see. So yeah, our jewel, I just kind of put whatever here. It's just life and crit strike chance. You can put whatever you want. There's like crit multi, you can get dex here as well. There's like a ton of things you could put on this jewel. Like there's a million beneficial stats. Don't sweat it too much. And then the flasks are just typical stuff. You have a jade, granite, quicksilver, quartz. All of them are gain charges on hit, and then increased armor during effect, increased evasion during effect, reduce effective curses, and reduce effective shock. It's pretty much just typical stuff. If you guys have any questions or whatever, feel free to throw them down below. Or you have any, recommendations, maybe you saw something I didn't or whatever, let me know. So this is my preliminary take on this and what I think should be pretty fun to play. And then all the additional things that I saw, issues that might pop up with the build, changes that might be made depending on certain things or certain preferences, play styles, drops, etc, etc, etc. Hope you guys are excited. If this looked cool to you, let me know. I'll drop the POB down below and you guys can pick through it and see. Again, I forgot to state earlier, the important thing here is the average damage and not the DPS. The DPS is not something you want to look at. It's just the average damage. And also, remember, for EQ, you need to change this to 40%. And if you're looking at the sweep, you need to change it to 100%. So you're getting accurate readings on the damage. And again, a look over at the the config. There's not a lot of padding here. The enemy will obviously be chilled. If I uncheck this, literally nothing happens because it's already accounting for it. Power charges, endurance charges, we will have 100% uptime on those. I have focus craft checked. And then we have blocked recently. You will always have blocked recently, and you will always be on consecrated ground. So there's nothing unrealistic here. There's nothing crazy going on. If you do end up pathing for Disciple of the Forbidden and grabbing that charge mastery, you can go ahead and simulate what the damage would be like with having frenzy charges. Again, the DPS goes up a shit ton, but that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at the average damage. It goes up by 600k. And then the Vaal EQ goes up from 4.5 to 5 basically. So it's a pretty good damage increase if you decide to use your chest implicit for that and path for Disciple of the Forbidden. Otherwise, yeah, that's everything for this video. You guys let me know what you think. You think the skill looks cool? I really hope we get level 20 gems soon because it will really determine how good this stuff ends up being. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please leave me a thumbs up. If you didn't enjoy it, feel free to leave me a thumbs down. Tell me what you think I can do better. If you want to support me, you like the videos on the channel, make sure you subscribe so you're notified when videos come out. I make tons of content around league start and stuff like that. I do build diaries on all the builds I play. I'll be playing this build. Even if this isn't my league starter, I will be playing this build at some point during the league. So if you want, updates on other builds, other POBs that I've made, and other build diaries I will be doing, feel free to sub for that. If you want to check out the stuff live, I'll be doing POB streams before the league launches. And once league does launch, I'll be pushing ladder and HCSSF over on my stream. So feel free to follow me on Twitch. I have a Twitter account if you want to see dank memes and or PoE related opinions. You can follow me on Twitter. And below will be a link to my Discord if you want to join my Discord and intermingle with other people in my community, talk PoE stuff. And I have free build help and advice channels in there that are active basically whenever I'm awake, completely for free. Yeah, no cost to you. All you have to do is join the Discord. So yeah, that's everything. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.